What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Babbles Nonsense podcast. On today's episode, we have Meenu back, and we are talking about the long-awaited topic of childhood trauma. I do feel like as humans, we all could relate to this aspect in some form or fashion, unless you don't have childhood trauma, and congratulations to you, because I don't know a single friend or person on this earth that I have not met that has trauma or triggers. So we talk about everything from signs and symptoms, if you think you may be experiencing trauma, to how she would go about coaching you if you were a client of hers. And again, a disclaimer, this is not intended to substitute advice from your medical doctor or a therapist. This is just a conversation between two friends and just talking about a very hot topic right now. So yeah, let's just go ahead and dive on into the episode.
All right, welcome back to a new episode with my favorite host, Donna, back with another hot topic. And Jonna, I'm going to let you do the honors.
Yeah. So, also for the people listening on my podcast, Meenu is back. And I want to give a quick shout out real quick. I ran into a friend today, Kenny, here in town. Everyone knows her as That's Kenny. And she actually stopped me and she said, I just want to let you know that the podcasts you do with me and you are really good and they're really vulnerable. And I want to thank you for being so vulnerable. She was like, because it's raw and you can tell it's authentic. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Kenny for saying that and just saying that about our podcast, because I do think we do a great job at trying to be as vulnerable as possible and trying to be as open and honest as we can. To an extent, and you doing the best you can with me to navigate people's issues that do come about. So I wanted to thank you for that. But yeah, we are going today to talk about childhood trauma. We posted a poll about 2 weeks ago now on the Instagram, and everyone voted for childhood trauma. Like everybody, like there was other topics, I can't even remember what they were now, but like one vote for the other topics, and like everyone voted for childhood trauma because we clearly all suffer from it.
Amen to that.
And that is why you have a job, Meenu.
Oh my gosh, I know. It's almost like I wish people didn't have it, but if they didn't have it, then I would be jobless.
Right. It is funny that you say that because I've actually said that to two people this week. So I went to my chiropractor on Monday and I told him like I was lifting weights over the weekend and I like clearly needed to go to the chiropractor. And I said, if it weren't for people like me, you wouldn't be in business. And he was like, you're right, but I don't want to see you in pain. And I said the same thing to a massage therapist today. I said, because she was like, your right side of your back is just really tight. I said, them damn weights.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, right? Everything is like ironic. It's like you don't want it, but you kind of need to have it,
Right.
for you to realize something else. It's like, and I feel like childhood traumas are like one of those things. It's like it helps you realize deep down that everybody has wounds, everybody has shadows, which is unaddressed, especially when it comes out at unexpected times. So that's what we're here to, really dive into today, because that seems to be something that is evergreen all the time, necessary for all the people. So we are diving into the questions that different people asked us.
Yeah. And like some of it, I think sometimes, and I don't think I realized, I know we all have baggage. We all have childhood trauma. Even if you lived in like what you would consider like a very normal, positive upbringing, you still take away some of that because then therein lies, we just talked about this before we hit record, generational trauma, which was passed down to our parents. So there is still some of that. And we'll kind of dive into why generational trauma does affect childhood trauma because it's one and the same essentially. It's just your experience versus your generation's experience.
Right.
But I didn't realize how much childhood trauma I had until I obviously became an adult and realized like certain things in my adulthood was triggering me or the way I responded to someone. And I still didn't realize it. Like I would question myself a lot. Like I'd be like, why am I so angry? Why do I keep beating myself up? Like, why do I keep having these negative thoughts about myself? And it wasn't until I started working with you that you brought out those things like some people say daddy issues. I have mommy issues. So it was not until I started working with you that I could actually identify like, oh, I'm doing it again. And I still have like I still have trouble distinguishing what is my actual feelings versus what is my triggers. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
still working on that, which I know it'll be a work in progress till the day I die, probably. I don't think anything is ever fully healed. I mean, maybe you can attest to that. Maybe people do fully heal. But it's hard not to go back to patterns and stuff like that. So kind of wanted to start there. Like, how would someone know? Like I said, I didn't realize I had it. I just thought like something was wrong with me. Like I keep getting upset about things. So how would someone be like, oh, that's actually my childhood trauma versus I'm just being a bitch today?
Sometimes it can be both,
Right.
Um, I mean, I really feel like everything comes with true alignment, and alignment comes with facing your own truth, which is one has to have enough courage to ask, how am I really feeling? Instead of all the fluff, instead of the should be's and could be's and must be's that society tells us to do and feel and be, how am I truly feeling today?
Yeah.
Like, am I feeling fucked up? Am I feeling bad? Am I feeling down? Am I feeling guilt or shame? Like, it takes a lot of courage for somebody to really be like, how am I actually feeling these days? What is really coming up for me? Right. And I think I've asked this question to you, and sometimes it's been very difficult for you to answer, what am I feeling? Like, I don't know, because sometimes you're used to feeling certain kind of way that becomes the new normal
Right.
until you experience a little bit of joy or a little bit of freedom. And then you're able to go back and say, oh, dang, that was not normal.
Right.
So I would just say the first step in really diving into understanding that you have baggage or you have childhood trauma is looking at your surroundings, looking at your job, looking at your relationship, looking at everything around you and asking if that makes you happy. And if that does, and you're still unhappy about some things that have happened in the past, something that is unprocessed and that keeps coming up in different situations as triggers in your relationships or your friendships, that is probably coming from your childhood.
Right. Now, you did mention emotions and like you stated, I had a difficult time expressing my emotions. I still kind of do. Some people that know me would probably say that's not true, but I do have a hard time not to other people, but to myself. Like actually like when you would ask me during a session like how are you feeling? And I would say
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like
Mm-hmm.
and then I actually use like so there's an app that I downloaded and it's like how do you feel? And you can like not trigger it, but you can like set an alarm on it to like ask you certain times of the day to ask you how you're feeling, and you have to pick. There's four categories. There's high energy, pleasant, high
Mm-hmm.
energy, unpleasant, and then low energy, pleasant, low energy, unpleasant. And like then you have to click on the words, and then it gives you a definition of it, and you can like try to learn how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my therapist that I saw wanted me to download that,
Mm-hmm.
and because I told her the same thing that I just didn't know how I was feeling, and she said that was a childhood trauma. She was like, we were discussing that. She was like, if you don't know how you're feeling emotionally as an adult, it's probably because you suppressed emotions a lot as a child.
Yes, and if you remember, one of your traumas is that you weren't allowed to say what you felt.
Right.
So because you weren't allowed to say what you felt, you learned how to suppress and suppress and suppress, and that became the new normal. And so I don't know became a new normal for you.
Right. And like I've mentioned to you in our sessions, I used to, the way I would get attention from my mom
Mm-hmm.
was like, because I would be quiet, be quiet, be quiet, because I didn't want to upset her because she was already upset with my sister's stuff going on. And then when I finally had reached, like, if I was just talking normally and people would overlook me or act like they didn't hear me, I then became louder and I became louder. And
Right.
if I still didn't get the attention, I then would slam doors and break things.
Mm-hmm.
And as a child, I remember that as a child. And then I would go to my room feeling very guilty, like just
Mm-hmm.
very guilty. Like, why did I do that?
Mm-hmm.
And like now I'm having to unpack all that. But like you said, like, and I noticed that I still have that same pattern in my relationships, whether it be platonic or romantic.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be quiet and I'll suppress my feelings because I'm like, I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to hurt them. But then I let it go too long and then I explode.
Right. And that's what happens. It's like, and not to be woo-woo about it or spiritual, but just to a little bit direction change is that like when energy is not processed, it builds up and then it explodes.
Yep.
because energy has to be released in some form or way. And if
Right.
it's not released, which is either in the form of communication or in the form of energy release or tapping or, specific mindfulness exercises or somatic work or body work, if it's not released, it will come out. But how will it come out? We never know how it'll come out.
Right. And who said it? I don't know who said it, but isn't there like it's like any energy in motion must stay in motion? So
Yes.
that's essentially what
Energy
you're
is energy.
saying.
Exactly. Emotion is energy in motion.
Right.
So when you have an emotional response, what do you need to do? Not stay still, not keep it stuck, not like, try to bury it, because what are you doing? You're keeping it stuck. So it's not moving.
Right.
How do you move it? You move it by talking about it. You move it by processing it. And if you don't do it, it will stay stuck. And emotion doesn't like to stay stuck. It's energy in motion.
And we talked about that on a previous podcast where like I kept saying I was feeling blah or feeling bad because I was going through something personal in my life. And I kept saying, but I just don't know how I feel. And I don't know why I feel this way. And then I was staying busy and I was painting my tile and I was doing all these things and I wasn't expressing it. So this past weekend, I finally just stayed on the couch and like was watching TV and I just could not stop crying at these TV shows I was watching.
Mhm.
And I
They're
was
telling
like,
you. They're
why?
the
But no, so I guess this is a two-part question. So if someone realizes like through our discussion that maybe they have to obviously they have to look inward and say, okay, these are my triggers, I need to work with someone. How like who would you recommend, obviously you, but like who would you recommend they work with? Do you recommend someone trying to dig through their childhood traumas on their own?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. And the reason is because I wouldn't recommend doing this on your own, because when you try to process something deeper on your own subconscious mind will not allow you to get to places that you need to have a release or to have an aha moment or for you to have a realization that something needs to happen, because your own subconscious mind is going to be like, no, 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 don't go there, that's painful. No, 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 let's not go to when you were 7 years old, that's painful. Let's not go to the extent of how bad that was because that was painful. So your own subconscious will block yourself from going deeper and having that release. That's why people need to be either working with coaches or therapists, somebody to guide them to go deeper, because even when they go deeper, they feel like they're being heard and they're being seen and they're allowed to go there without anything bad happening.
And I think
But
it
if
also, yeah, I think it helps that you like you're a professional and then you can actually like make connections where maybe I couldn't.
No, absolutely, because you're too attached.
Right.
You're too attached to your own story. You're too attached to what happened to you. You're too attached to your childhood. You're too emotional. So when you're too attached and too emotional, you're not going to be able to be logical about it and address things that really need to be addressed. You're going to be emotional about it,
Right.
right? Then when you're emotional about it, I'll be like, no, Jana, like tell me actually what happened on that day. Break it down into detail so we can actually process those things, right? And obviously we use multiple tools to process it. But my point is, I'm not attached to your narrative. To me, when I saw you and I started working with you, you were a stranger,
Right.
right? You're a stranger to me. So I'm not attached to your narrative. And instead, I look at it objectively and see what needs to be done.
Right. And that's funny that you say that. This just came to my mind. Me and my friend were eating dinner over the weekend, just talking about issues and things like that. And we, friends give each other advice, right? When it
Yeah.
comes to guys or girls or whatever. And that's something I mentioned to her. I was like, because she was having issues with a guy that she had dated or something, and I was giving advice. And I was like, but look, I said, it's easy for me to give you advice. I said, would I take my own advice? I don't know until I'm in that situation. I said,
Mhm.
but I can give you advice because I have no emotional connection to this guy. I have
Yeah.
no emotional connection to you. So that's why I think it's easier for friends to tell
Mhm.
you, oh, just do this, just do
Yeah.
that. It's
Yeah.
easy.
They're not in it. They're not in it
Right.
experiencing it. They're not the ones going out on dates with them. They're not the ones sleeping with them. They're not the ones sharing the bed with them and intimate memories with that person. It's very easy to be objective and give advice, especially in a romantic situation, unless
Right.
you are there and experiencing the exact same feelings. It's not gonna hit the same.
Well, talking about a little bit like relationships and childhood trauma. I mean, that kind of goes hand in hand as well because women and men both pick partners or spouses based on the trauma that they've experienced.
Right. And it's usually kind of an extreme spectrum, which is what I've observed. So either you attract a partner that is exactly like either of your parents, or you attract somebody that is so different because you're so traumatized that you can't repeat the pattern. So you attract someone that is completely the opposite.
Right. And something that I've noticed, and I'm reading a book right now, like my childhood being so chaotic, that was the norm, right? So it was norm for me to be ignored. It was norm for me to live in this chaos with my sister. It was
Mhm.
very normal for me to be put down, emotionally abused, to, you know, just to give me that sense of low self worth, right? Even though it's not a good feeling, that's what
Mhm.
was normal. So
Right.
what if I like now, like trying to process what I've done in my adult like relationships, there could be the kindest, most sweetest person, and I'll go on a couple dates with them. I'm like, this is boring. Like this,
Yeah.
it's uncomfortable because it's boring and it's safe. But then
Yeah.
I'll go on a date with someone that now I didn't realize it at the time, but now I've realized looking back, it gave me the same feeling as what I grew up feeling. And so
Right.
I'm bonded to that.
Unsafe and unstable, unsafe and unstable, which is giving you that adrenaline that, oh my God, what's going to happen tomorrow? I have no idea. It's kind of keeping you on your toes and you think it's thrilling,
Mhm.
but you don't like it. But at the same time, that's what you attract because that was normal for you for such a long time.
Right. Well, and that's what quote unquote love was to me, right? Like if my mom ignored me and she
Mhm.
didn't really pay me any attention, and my sister, who is supposed to quote unquote love me because she's family, emotionally abused me, told me I was worth nothing, then if I meet a guy that's doing the same thing, that's what love is to me, right? Because that's what my childhood trauma says love
Right.
is.
Right. So the key is, the beauty about this genre is that you recognize that it's abusive and you recognize that it's not healthy. You recognize that you want something different. But there are a lot of people that will just accept it for what it is and kind of stay there because they're okay with it or they're too afraid of wanting something else.
True, but sometimes like I think it may be a subconscious thing. Like they don't even realize that they're attracted to it. I think that's what's hard is logically you know it's not right, but
Yeah.
something about it feels right.
Yeah.
And it's that trauma bond from your childhood trauma.
Exactly. That's why, we recorded this episode, which is called Soulmate or Trauma Mate, where we talked about a lot of this, which is,
Yeah.
yes, it's a trauma bond. We attract, at the end of the day, we attract what is familiar to us, even if it's horrible. We attract what is familiar to us, even if it's toxic, because it's familiar. Even
Hmm.
if you know that it's unfamiliar and it's extremely healthy, but it's not familiar, you're more bound to like run away from it because it's unknown territory. And as humans, we are afraid of the unknown. We'll avoid the unknown. So we'll do the familiar thing and we'll do the same toxic cycle,
Right.
even though intellectually it's toxic.
Right. And that kind of gets into generational trauma because generational trauma is obviously childhood trauma passed down through generations.
Mhm.
And I think it goes even a step deeper. And I think you may have told me that, and it kind of made sense when you told me that. You tell me if you told me this when I say it? Like you being in your mother's womb, you
Mhm.
experience her trauma energetically.
Yes, I
So,
did.
so there's a two part there. So you like feel the energy when you're just a little egg in your mother's
Right.
womb through her trauma, but then
Yes.
your parents do the best they can to parent you. There's no right or wrong way to parent other than
Yes.
if you're being abusive, like physically.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
but they're doing the best they can based on what their childhood trauma experiences is.
Exactly. And it doesn't even have to mean that they have childhood traumas. It just means that what is normal for them. And they don't think it's messed up. They just literally don't think it's messed up. So it's you think it's messed up because you have awareness and you have knowledge and you have tools and you have exposure. They didn't have the exposure that you did. So they think it's okay to say certain things. But for you, it's affected you in some form or way, right? So, and I
Right.
talked about this to you, like when a child is conceived, which is typically, I think, after 90 days is when the soul comes into the body. the womb and it really starts forming. And if the mother is extremely stressed and the pregnancy is very traumatic and emotionally whatever however traumatic it is, usually after the birth of the child there is a significant period of time where the child experiences some form of trauma, and almost like maybe the child will be crying all night, having trouble sleeping, having trouble eating, like lots of things. And so this is really interesting, not to make it about me, but when my mother was pregnant with me, my dad joined her, enrolled her in a yoga and meditation class.
Oh,
So
cool.
she had to do it every single day. She had to meditate every single day. And so everybody was calling me a very easy baby. They were like, you barely cried, you always ate everything, you never fussed. Like there was just no fuss. It was so easy to raise you.
And meditation comes natural to you.
Exactly. So it was just interesting because she had done a lot of work when she was pregnant. So yes, it does pass on, because at the end of the day, we are in the womb and energy is contagious, and we are in the energetic field of the mother. So generational trauma is a very real thing.
So, going back to what you said about how our parents may have not realized something was wrong, but I then became aware of it and then I stopped that generational trauma. So, if
Mhm.
someone's listening to this podcast, I know we kind of touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but like, and you said that they would have to be self-aware. So, what if someone's not self-aware? How, I guess, I don't even know if there is an answer. How would someone become self-aware enough to be like, I've got to work on this?
I think honestly, it's all about you wanting peace and happiness. Let's say there's somebody and they're just like, I'm so sick of this. I just want peace and happiness. I just want to be happy. I just want to be peaceful. I just want to be happy. I just want to be peaceful, but I can't. Then there's something there.
Yeah,
Want it, but you can't do it. Why not? What's hidden behind the surface? Right? So I think the best indication, let's say you're not spiritual, you're not into meditation, you're not self-aware, you're not conscious, whatever that is. Like, if you're a person that wants to be happy and joyful and at peace and just balanced overall, and you're not able to achieve that, that means there is something that is beneath the surface which needs to be addressed and released and processed.
right. And I want
That's the answer.
I found something online that because I was just looking up some research a little bit just to see, and there's some things that impact like the impact of childhood trauma on adulthood. So I'm going to read these very quickly. So like if you're experiencing these, maybe they like trigger your mind, like just like what you said, but this is kind of like a list, like on a quote unquote medical, because I'm more medical. Like I need direct answers.
Yeah.
So like if in your cognition, you may have impaired readiness to learn. So what you were just saying, like, or what we were saying, if you're not self-aware, difficulty with problem solving, language
Mhm.
delays, problems with concentration, poor academic achievement, your physical health, you may experience sleep disorders, eating disorders, poor immune system functioning, cardiovascular disease, and a shorter lifespan. Your emotions, you may have difficulty controlling emotions, trouble recognizing emotions, limited coping skills, increased sensitivity to stress, shame and guilt, excessive worry, hopelessness, feelings of helplessness, lack of self-efficiency. In your relationships, you may have attachment problems, poor understanding of social interactions, difficulty forming relationship with peers, problems in romantic relationships, intergenerational cycles of abuse and neglect. Your mental health, you may experience depression, anxiety, negative self image, low self esteem, PTSD, suicidality. And in your behavior, you may experience poor self regulation, social withdrawal, aggression, poor impulse control, risk taking, illegal activity, sexually acting out, adolescent pregnancy, drug and alcohol misuse. And then the last one with brain development, you may have a smaller brain size, less efficient processing, impaired stress response, and chain in gene expression. When
Yep.
I looked at this and then I took the quiz that was attached to it, so I think this was on betterme.com.
Mhm.
Do you know how many of these? I was like, yep, yep, yep. And then I took the quiz. And so the like out of the score, like it's a short quiz, it's like a 5 minute quiz, and like the 40 is the highest you can get. I scored a 29 and it said your trauma score is high. You're a 29 out of 40. The way you engage with the world and manage your emotions is being affected by your negative childhood experiences.
Yep.
So, which we know because I kind of, you helped me put that together. So I kind of knew that. It's just, I wish I kind of would have done this quiz before I worked with you and then after I worked with you to see if some
The
of it came
difference,
down.
I
Right.
know, I think it has actually gone down a lot, but we can see the difference now, can
Right.
we?
Right. Because I was just looking things up. And so, what type of work do you do in your type of coaching to help with childhood trauma?
So we do, I mean, I do a lot of inner child work. So it's almost like the adult acts out when the child is not addressed. It's always like that. So we can continue to work on adulthood. We can continue to work on the issues that's coming up right now and present. But if we don't do the subconscious work, which is inner child work, which goes back like regression therapy, almost like going back and working on certain things and rewiring certain things and reprogramming certain things. And unless we do that, the adult will keep acting out. So
So,
if
you
you don't
mentioned,
want,
go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, 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 I'm just saying if you don't want the adult to act out, the child needs to stop acting out.
And
So there is,
you mentioned regression therapy. Is
yeah.
that what that is? Is like going all the way back to your childhood?
Yeah, so regression therapy, obviously, I'm not a therapist, so I can't use that term. So I do like regression modalities, which is like, subconscious work, theta healing, hypnotherapy is something I do a lot in my sessions, which is a form of regression therapy where we go back to primitive years of your childhood and then we see what needs to be processed, what needs to be released, how does the narrative need to change, and how can we reprogram the subconscious mind to change those narratives. For
Right.
example, I was working on a client just a couple of days ago, and he had a lot of fear just speaking the truth. Right. So after we went back to his childhood, because as a child, he was not allowed to speak out anything. He was not allowed to say the truth. He was not allowed to speak. And he felt really unsafe. So we went back to the childhood. We changed a few things. We did some, like moving things around. And then we came back to the present. And then literally 3 days after, he sent me a message saying, I kicked ass in the meeting. I have never spoken up like this. Everybody was so impressed. The hypnotherapy is a real deal. So, what did we do? What was different is we worked on the child. And so now the adult feels safer to speak up.
Right. And I know there's something when we worked together, you had mentioned to me, like, I, and I did that a lot. I still do it a lot. Like, if I'm having a certain thought about myself or when I'm wanting to say something that I don't say, then I essentially tell myself to shut up, not saying it out loud, like, but essentially I'm telling my subconscious to be quiet, which is my inner child. And I'm
Mhm.
like, don't say that. They won't understand. They won't like it. And I'm still doing to my inner child what was done to me as a child. So I know
Mm,
then when we worked together, you were like, you're going to have to stop telling your inner child to
yes,
be quiet.
because she's not going to be quiet. That's the truth. She's not going to be quiet. As an adult, you've intellectualized the process and you see the inconveniences of saying it out loud. So you're saying, don't say it out loud. But if you don't unleash the child, she'll keep coming back in different forms or ways where you're going to be forced one day to be like, oh, okay, really need to address this.
And that was the breaking point for me as I came to you last year. Was it last year or 2 years ago?
It was
Last
last.
last
Mhm.
year, where I was at my breaking point. I was like, I cannot keep doing this. I keep repeating the same patterns. I'm hurting people I really care about. Like I'm pushing them away from me when I don't mean to. Um, like I said, like I would just suppress, 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 explode
Mhm.
onto people that I really cared about because that's what we tend to do subconsciously anyways. We explode on people that we know care about us because we
Yeah,
think they'll always be there.
will
And
always
I
be.
and I used to think that, but you can eat love is not enough in this world and I'm starting to learn that.
Yeah.
You like I can love my best friend all day long. But if she
Mhm.
pushes me away time and time and time and time again, those feelings start like I still love you, but I can love you from a distance.
Yeah, you can love me from a distance. And that's why they say love can always be unconditional, but tolerance and respect are not.
Right.
And, they are conditional and they have to be conditional. In fact, if that's unconditional, then there's bigger issues there, you
No, I
know?
agree. I agree. Now, I have some questions from Instagram. How there's let's see. How would you inform someone who has been abused by their father and left them afraid of forming relationships? How would you advise them to overcome that?
Abused by their father and now wanting to work on
He,
relationships.
yeah, he said left them afraid of forming relationships with someone, whether it be platonic, romantic. They just are afraid of forming relationships.
Right. So the best way to do this is really honestly very deep subconscious work and a lot of inner child work, because as an adult this person realizes that he's lacking this and he wants that and he desires forming relationships, which is forming connections, whether it's platonic or not. Right?
Hmm.
But the bigger program, remember the iceberg we talked about, where the tip of the iceberg is your conscious, the bigger part of the iceberg, which is below the surface where people don't see, is your subconscious. So for this person, the iceberg below is all the childhood trauma with his father.
Hmm.
So we need to work on that. We need to really work on that. We need to do inner child work. We need to heal certain wounds. And then we need to come to acceptance and grace. And only after that will this person be ready for relationships. Because if this person starts trying to form relationships now, he is going to attract somebody. How is he going to attract somebody? And we talked about this from his subconscious, which probably has some trauma. So he's going to attract his trauma mate
Hmm.
or a lot of trauma mates, which
Right.
reflects his childhood. And he's not going to be able to attract a partner or anybody, even platonic, from a space of empowerment and healed version. Instead, it's going to be, oh, I didn't have these needs fulfilled in my childhood. And so I'm going to either attract somebody that wants to save me or rescue me, or I'm going to attract somebody that is very similar.
Okay. That, yeah. And I would also add, don't try this alone. You definitely need to work with a
Definitely.
professional or a coach.
Definitely need to. Yes, either a therapist or a coach, because like I said before, trying to do certain things on your own, especially deep unconscious work on yourself, is not going to take you as deep as you want it to be, rather than working like with a therapist or a coach, because they, like I said, they're unattached and they can help you go to these places with like a lot of support.
Right. And I know it's scary thinking about like working with a coach or a therapist, but they're there to help you. They're not there to judge you. They're truly there to help you. Like, I didn't know me and you from nothing when I met you. Like, and I got more accomplished working with you in the short amount of time that we worked together because I love your personality for one. It's very similar to mine. It's just very blunt and to the point, and that's what I need. I need someone to be blunt and to the point. And some people don't. Some people like, a little bit of easement into it, but I need that. Like when I've had therapists in the past that do ease me into things, no, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Like I might give you a little pushback initially, but I'm also a very deep thinker and I'm going to go home and thinking about it and guarantee you in 24 to 48 hours, I'm going to come back. I'm usually going to say you were right.
I mean,
And I'm probably going to apologize.
I can't count the number of times that's happened between us.
Right? Like I might like get like my aunt does the same thing. I might get a little pissed because you're calling me out. Who wouldn't? If that's just your initial reaction in life.
Right.
But I truly do try to go home and be like, why was I so mad? And then I'll think about it and think about it. And I'll be like, man, I'm mad because she's right.
And like I'm adding to what Jonah said here. It's like, and people think it's like a pride thing or an ego thing to say, oh, I did this all on myself. I handled this by myself. Like I didn't need any help. Let me tell you this, guys. Nobody is giving you a prize. Nobody is giving you a trophy. Nobody is giving you a medal for doing it all alone by yourself. And it probably will take so much longer than if you just hired a professional and got to the root of it right away. It will hurt, it will suck, but you will get better so quickly
Agreed.
rather than doing it all on your own. Then you have to go on that journey. You have to listen to a bunch of podcasts, read a gazillion self-help books to actually get to the root of it. And it's not something you want to do unless you have too much time, in your hands, because time is a limited resource and money isn't. Just saying.
Right. Now I have another scenario. I was about to say scenario. I was trying to be all, I don't know why I was going to do that, but I threw a little accent on there. I don't know why. Anyways, how would you recommend someone overcoming their fear of becoming just like their father?
I think you need to go right at it. You know how I handle fear, and I think you worked with me on this, is I will say, what is the worst situation? What is the worst case scenario if you become your father? And then what happens? And then what happens? And then what happens? And then what happens? I want you to see the actual consequences of why. And then I also want you to tell me what is the best case situation if you're not your father, right? And then I want you to see everything really tangibly, see everything as it is and how it will be, because you can have a lot of fears and you
Mhm.
can still choose different,
Right.
right? Choosing different is not the absence of fear. Choosing different is something which comes despite the fear.
Hmm.
So you can say, thank you, fear, for showing up and telling me what I don't want to do. Thank you, fear, for showing up and showing me what I need to work on and warning me and protecting me. Because I have this fear, I'm definitely not going to do it.
And be appreciative of the fear.
Be appreciative of the fear, because every negative emotion, believe it or not, is here to serve us in some form or way when we understand how it's serving us.
I think so. I was listening to a podcast with Jay Shetty and this guy, Matthew Hussey. He came out, he's like a relationship coach, which when we do our relationship podcast, we'll talk more in depth. But he said something about fear. He said it was more of a fear of a relationship, but what he said kind of rings true here. He was like, everything, and he was talking about negative emotions, like you just said, how there's always a good thing out of negative emotions. He said,
Yeah.
you have to experience those negative emotions. He said, does those heartbreaks hurt? Yes. Are they extremely painful? Yes. He said, but I grew the most during the most painful heartbreaks, the most painful experiences of my life. He was like, so I'm very thankful for them
Yeah.
because that's when
Absolutely.
he talked about growing the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you don't hit rock bottom and if you don't grow from that, then how are you gonna build resilience? How are you gonna build self-trust? How are you gonna build courage? How will you build it unless you do it?
Right.
Unless you do it. Like it's like asking you to lift weights, and I'm suddenly upping the game and I'm telling, okay, now lift 25 pounds, now lift 50 pounds. And you can say, I'm really afraid, I can't do it, whatever. Or you can try to lift it and then lift it and then say, oh, I did it despite the fear.
And my aunt, this is going to be way off topic. My aunt's she's very like you. I think that's why, like, I really liked your coaching because my aunt talks to me the same way. I love my aunt. She's just very blunt to the point. So I've been wanting, and I know I talked to you about this too. I was like, I've been wanting to paint my house white, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm so scared I'm going to hate it because I really hate change. And I know that's a childhood trauma.
Mhm.
And did the same thing to me. She goes, what is the worst thing that can happen if you paint your house and you hate it? I was like, well, then I have to spend money to repaint it. She said, okay, think about what you just said. She said, you didn't donate an organ and die.
Exactly.
I was like, okay, Aunt Debbie, thank you.
Yeah, I literally feel like there's just so much learning experience in each thing, and there is literally no such thing as a mistake. I think it's all about trial and error. It's like I tried this, it didn't work out, so I'm doing something different this time. I tried this, it didn't work out. I think the problem happens when people start creating stories and say, I shouldn't have done that, I should have done that, I could have done that, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. And now that's conditioning, and that's how society wants you to think, but it's up to you how you want to think about it.
True.
Like you make it mean something. It doesn't mean shit. You know?
It's very true. And that piece of advice alone has gotten me through some really hard times, like when I've maybe sent a text a little too fast and didn't think about what I was going to say before I said it. And then I'm like, I can't take it back. But then, like you said, if I think about it and go, you know what? I said it, I sent it. It is what it is. It's out in the universe. How I respond to the response of me doing it is then the true value in it.
Exactly. That's why they say, and this is another episode we're going to record another day, guys, which is about karma, which is you create your karma on how you respond.
Right.
You
And I know
can't,
I
you know,
texted you one day about karma. I was like, is this gonna come back to get me? And you were like, how do you feel about it? I was like, well, I don't feel real bad about it. She was like, then no. So I was like, okay, good. I just wanted to talk to the karma queen about it because
yeah, the
I don't want
karma
karma to get
episode.
me.
Oh, that's so funny. The karma episode is going to be so contradicting and so controversial. And it's also going to be really interesting. So definitely stay tuned because that's happening soon. But my point is really all you can do is show up and be your true self. At that time, do you feel like sending that text? At that time, does it align with your truth? Then do it. Right. And then how the other person responds is not your responsibility. It's none of your business. It's not something you need to worry about. How you respond to that is how you can phrase it because you're creating your karma in your responses.
Right. I agree. I agree. I have another scenario for you, or
Yes.
a question, not really a scenario.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. No, I said we're not done with the questions, are we?
No, no, no. We got a couple more. Another question was, how would you recommend someone get over emotional abuse from a narcissist and a bully?
Ooh, that hits home for me. I've been through that. Okay. So the way you get over is you absolutely don't expand on that energy, which means, and I know this is going to be really hard for people that went through abuse, is talking about it all the time with your friends, talking about it all the time with your therapist, talking about it all the time with your parents. Oh, I went through this. Oh, I went through this. This person did this to me. That person did that to me. Da, 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 da. What are you doing? You're building it up. What are you doing? You're expanding all that energy. Instead, what has happened has happened. And I'm not saying let it go. I'm not saying forget about it. But how can you pivot from it and how can you heal from it is by raising your self-worth. Because chances are, if you've been with a narcissist, there has been gaslighting. Chances are, if you've been with a narcissist, there has been self-worth issues that you struggle with, or your self-worth has been questioned or threatened in some form or way. Maybe you were made to feel that something was wrong with you. So in order to truly heal from it, you don't put any attention or validation to what happened to you. You don't pay attention to that story, and you only focus on the person you really want to become. And you put all the energy that you possibly can in becoming that person that you're going to be proud of. That is the best revenge and the best way also to heal. It is not healing when you're always talking about them. That's not healing.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to help. That means they're on a pedestal. They're still the main person in your life. Now, you need to be the main person in your life. They're not the main person in your life. So, as long as you can remember that and work on yourself and let them do their own thing, you do your own thing and up your game, you will heal just fine.
And piggybacking off of that, something my uncle told me a long time ago, and I'll never forget it, is he told me the opposite of love is hate. So if you hate someone, you still really care about them because you're expending the same amount of energy that you're giving love to someone to hate someone.
Absolutely.
He
And
was like,
that's
so
why,
hating someone is caring about someone. Like,
oh,
not in the sense of
1000.
like, oh, I love you, I care about you, but in the sense of
Yeah.
they're consuming your thoughts
Mhm.
constantly and they are taking up your emotional space.
Right, right. So when somebody is constantly talking about somebody else, I already know their energy reserve. I call it energy real estate, in my coaching language, which is how much real estate are you giving this person in your energy? So
Yep.
if you're talking so much, then you're giving like 60, 70% of your real estate to this person. So what happens to you? How much of real estate do you have for yourself? Right? So the opposite of love is indifference. It's not hatred because you think it's hatred, but the real opposite of love is indifference because you don't feel anything. And
Right.
that feels great.
And I do want to commend this person for asking this question because number one, you recognize it.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's the first thing is recognizing that you have been abused by a narcissist and a bully.
Mhm.
So, and like you said, we're not saying don't talk about it. Like we're saying you have to go through it. You
Yes.
have to talk about it and be okay with putting it away. You can
Yes. And
still
be
tell your
okay with
truth.
processing it,
Yeah,
right? Because you can still talk about it. And you know this. You know
yeah,
this because you've done therapy before. You can talk about it and not process it.
right. It's when you're talking about it and not taking action.
Exactly.
Because that's what I was doing for a really long time until I met you. And then you gave me the actionable steps to expend that energy. I still talk about it. I'm talking about it right now on the podcast, but it no
Right.
longer affects me the way it once did. I can now
Exactly.
openly talk about it and not feel that shame and that guilt and that embarrassment about it. Because I used to, and I think I said this to you when I first met you, I used to go, well, my childhood wasn't that bad. Like I wasn't physically abused. Like my sister hit me and stuff, but like whose sister
Yeah.
doesn't? But I wasn't physically abused. Like it wasn't that bad. It wasn't the worst story I've ever heard in my life. You see movies that are 10 times worse, right? So I was like, it's just, but you had to be like, but it's your story.
Exactly.
And it's okay to tell your story
Exactly.
because
Yes.
that was me again. childhood
Mhm.
trauma, suppressing, saying,
Right.
but it's fine.
Right.
That happened. It's no big deal. It's fine.
Right. Absolutely. So the fact that this person has come up and asked this question, kudos to you because yes, you recognize it, you're aware of it, and you're ready to heal. So now your focus is all about you, almost to a point where I want you to be a little more obsessed with yourself and why you're amazing and why you're awesome and why you're worthy. Like, try to raise your vibration, try to fill in your cup. That is the best thing you can do
Hmm.
after healing from narcissistic relationships.
All right, I have one more question. Somebody asked that they feel like they have been in therapy forever, and is this how it's always going to be?
Yes, so that's very interesting because I wish I had gotten more context about that. But let me answer this question to you. Some of the questions that I want you to journal on or introspect on is that what is therapy doing for you? If you're saying you've been in it forever, what is it doing?
Oh no, you froze up. Hold on, guys. She froze up. Sorry, you froze up. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, you were saying what is therapy doing for you?
Yes. So what is therapy doing for you? And then how is it adding value to you? Is there any value that you get out of going to therapy? And if you're saying you keep going back and you're not getting any value, then are you going back for the relationship with the therapist? Right. So, and also, I want you to really take account of all the tangibles, right? Meaning, on a scale of 0 to 10, how sad are you? On a scale of 0 to 10, how anxious are you? On a scale of 0 to 10, how stressed are you? And then after going to these therapy sessions, are those levels coming down? Are you seeing a tangible progress? If you're not seeing a tangible progress, then maybe it is time to take alternate paths. Maybe it is time to look at something else depending on what you want. Or if you're honest with yourself and say, well, I'm going to therapy for the relationship because I like my therapist, I don't care if I heal or not, I just like talking to someone, then you're going to keep going to therapy for the rest of your life. But if you're actually healing and seeing results and tangible results and progress, then that means it's serving you. And if you're not seeing any of that progress, then it's not serving you and it's time to look at something else different.
And that's something that I know that I have spoke openly about as well. I had been in and out of therapy off and on for years, and then not dissing anything my therapist, they were wonderful. But I don't think I was at a place in my life to fully heal. And I don't know if I was given the full tools because I wasn't open and honest about what I wanted, the goals, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I met you and you kind of laid out how your plan would work, there was no hiding with you. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was no hiding my emotions. You were like, we're here to heal and that's what we're going to do. And I need you to be open with me. So you would ask me hard questions and make me bring that out and then go from there to heal it, like doing the inner child work, talking about the childhood traumas, trying to figure out why I'm so triggered as an adult.
Right. Exactly. So I think each person needs to evaluate, even if somebody's like been going to therapy and listening to this episode for years and years and years and not seeing results or healing in a way that they want to, ask why are you going? What are the tangibles that you're seeing? Can you start measuring the tangibles? Because time is energy, time is
Mhm.
effort, time is a very limited resource,
Right.
right? If you can pay somebody a little more money but in a short period of time get more tools, get more freedom, get more peace, get more understanding, then is that more worth for you? Does that have more value for you than going to therapy?
And for
Right.
me,
And
yeah. And for me, like I quit going to therapy. I started working with you. And then I got the tools I needed from you. And then I recently was like, I think I'm going to go back to a therapist. But this time was different. This time was
right.
different from the first time because I went in going, I know it works for me and this is what I need to do.
Right, exactly. And I think so. I think a lot has to do with what are you looking for? For example, Jonna, like you need somebody that's blunt with you. You need somebody that's straight with you. You don't want somebody that's too soft and mellow with you because you're fundamentally there and you're fundamentally ready to hear it. Even if you don't like it, you're somebody that does the deep diving and the research and the thinking. So you will appreciate personalities like that, right? But if you're going to stick to comfort and say, well, don't tell me the hard stuff, don't tell me I'm too sensitive, then, maybe you're not ready to hear it.
Right,
So,
right. I mean, I wish more people were like that in the world in general. Like if I'm dating someone and you don't like me and you don't want to date me anymore, like I want someone to be that bluntly rude with me. I want them to go, "Hey, look, I just don't like you." Cool, cool. That's my closure. I get it. Like I don't have to sit here and guess and wonder and whatever. Same with a friendship. Like if someone's like, we just don't jive. I don't get like we don't our personalities. We're just like I
yeah,
do that in my relationships with my friends, and they know that. That's why
yeah.
I don't have a lot of friends.
I mean, I trust you because you're like that, because I like that. I like confrontational people. I'm very confrontational. And I really appreciate confrontational people because then you know what's running in their mind and you can take the action to fix it or change it or, whatever. But if you're not open about it, then, how are you going to fix it? And I think this episode, more than anything else, I think it's going to encourage people to be more open, like,
I said that was the last question, but I just have a question. I know the answer, but I want to ask it as a question because this is something that a topic of me and a friend talked about when we got into like an argument or whatnot. And guys, I just want to go ahead and say this, like arguments aren't bad. Like if you're arguing with a friend, if you're arguing with a spouse, like it's not a bad thing. Now, I'm not going to say bad or good because we got to stop using positive and negative connotations with scenarios, but it depends on how you're speaking to people. Like, obviously, there is a correct way to speak to people, like just having an open and honest conversation. They're not bad to like argue or to disagree because growth can come from that with other people. That was just a sidebar. That was not the question. The question is so, our triggers that we have from our childhood traumas,
mhm,
when you are entering a new friendship, a new relationship, whether it be romantic or platonic, it is not the other person. So, like if we're talking about me, it is
mhm,
not that friend that I'm entering the relationship with. It is
mhm.
not their responsibility to understand my triggers and dance around them.
Absolutely not.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Absolutely. I think that the fact that I'm not saying you, but humans think that they should dance around my triggers, they should protect my feelings.
They know
I,
that I have this childhood trauma.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's entitlement because nobody needs to protect your feelings. But if they're your friend, if they're near and dear ones, the way they will do it because they care about you. They will
right,
do it because they love you. Now that's a service. It's not a gift. I mean, it's sorry, it's not an obligation, it's a gift. So yes, having those expectations from friendships is healthy. I'm not saying it's unhealthy, but being entitled is not. But
right,
you can have the expectations and you can make requests. You can say, hey, this is really triggering for me. Hey, this is what's coming up for me. And I would love it if we have certain types of conversations or clear the air. And I would love it if, we can talk through this, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's not an obligation. That's a gift again. So if somebody is being kind to you for your triggers and understanding and whatever, that is a gift. That is a great friend, right? But if somebody's being an ass to you and they know your triggers and they keep doing it, then maybe it's time to like reevaluate and ask, like, do they even care to like make you comfortable? Because I think at the end of the day, Jonna, like, I think everybody wants to feel seen and everybody wants to feel safe. And if you
right,
can't feel seen and you can't feel safe in friendships or relationships and they keep triggering you, then maybe it's time to walk away. It's like, I think I told you this before. It's a lousy example, or maybe a good one. When you're a recovering alcoholic, you don't sit in a bar every day.
right,
You just can't do that.
right,
You have to stay away from the bar and you have to heal the triggers. And then maybe one day you'll be able to go to the bar and have a non-alcoholic drink. And that'll be okay. But when it is hot and heavy, when it is so triggering, when the wounds are still fresh, one needs to heal first and do the work by themselves. They can't expect other people to coddle them. They need to separate and they need to do the work, heal themselves, and then come back. Because once you've healed, your triggers are not going to be your triggers.
right. And I had a perfect example for that as well. So, the friend I was talking about, this was before I started working with you. We had had our first argument, and something that really triggers me, one of my childhood triggers, is being ignored. So,
Mm,
being ignored in my adult life really sets me into a panic.
mm,
And I'm obviously working on that. I worked on it with you. Like when I would be dating someone, if they didn't respond like within a couple hours, I'm like, oh my God, they're ignoring me. They hate me. I
Right.
would do that, but not just in dating relationships, in friendships too. If my friends, like, if I know that they typically respond, I would be like, oh my God, like they're mad at me. They're mad at, they hate me. They're mad at me. That was just
Mm-hmm.
my go-to trauma response.
Mm.
And so me and this friend had our first fight because like we're new friends, and this was
Oh.
year, or this was last year. So we're like, so we were new friends because we met at my job or whatnot.
Mhm.
And she was super busy with work. And like
Mhm.
I had asked her to go to lunch, and she was like, "Hey, I can't go to lunch." And I was like, "No big deal. That's fine." She was and then she texted me, I think like 20 minutes later, asking me to go to lunch. And I was like, "Do you not remember just telling me that you couldn't or something?" She was like, oh, I'm just so busy. Like, I just don't remember. And I was just like, she hates me. Like, that was my immediate thing. And so
Mm.
it happened like a couple days in a row, like a scenario like that. And then like I brought it up, but not in a good way. Like, I was very blunt about it. And I was just like, you ignore me all the time. And just was like, and so trying to let her know that that was my childhood trauma trigger. But she was also trying to let me know that someone being that aggressive and saying
Mm.
that she was deliberately ignoring me was also her childhood trigger.
Right,
So we were
right,
triggering each other. And it finally took us like an argument to get to the point of like, well, why do you feel that way? Why do I feel that way? But because we are good friends, we were able to have that conversation and realize we were like, oh, we're triggering each other.
yeah, right. And I think that's really healthy friendship right there because if you're able to like sit there and talk about your triggers, I'm like that's extremely healthy, and people don't do that these days.
When,
More
like you
people.
said, she gives me that gift. So now, like, if she can't get, like, she knows, and so she responds and says, "Hey, I'm not ignoring you." Like,
Exactly.
so
So
she get, and I do the same. I'm not as blunt as I typically am with other friends. With
yeah,
her, I'm a little bit
exactly.
softer with her because I know that's a trigger for her.
Exactly. So it's a beautiful relationship between you both because you're both giving each other the gift.
Right.
That's my point. It's again, it's not an obligation, it's a gift.
It's because I care about her as a friend and I don't want to hurt her.
Exactly, exactly. The way things are like streamlined right now in society and social media is that, oh, if this person is triggering you, cut them off. If this person is triggering you, cut them off, cut them off, cut them off. Boundaries,
Quote
boundaries.
unquote match energy.
Yeah, yeah, match energy and then boundaries, boundaries. And it's like, this is the thing. I'm not saying boundaries are not healthy. I believe in boundaries. But at the same time, you can't keep cutting everybody that's triggering you. You just can't do that because we're a part of the society and people are going to trigger you. If it's not this person today, it's going to be somebody else tomorrow. So if you're somebody that's getting triggered very easily, the best way for you to benefit would be to actually heal the triggers, and that way, you're not constantly on the edge and you're not always saying everybody else should, like, how do I say it? Like, they have to understand my needs and cater to my needs because that is entitlement.
Right. Right.
So
And we're
both
all
of them.
guilty of it. I'm not saying I'm a perfect healed person over here. Like, I still act out of character. I still get angry at my trauma. I still am going through my trauma. And because it's just a new revelation that I've just come to like these points matching them and being like, oh, wow, I'm now understanding why I hate being ignored so much. I'm now
Mm.
understanding why. So it's now becoming like I knew something was wrong. I then
Mhm.
worked with you. We connected some dots. I then had to continue connecting the dots, and I'm still trying to heal.
Right, exactly. And I think as long as you are trying to heal, that is the best way you can heal. Because I think you asked me, I think you made a statement in the beginning of the podcast, which was like, I don't know if anybody has fully healed. And
Mhm.
let me tell you this, if anybody is going to come and say that I'm fully healed, run. Like literally run in the opposite direction because that is not true. That is not human. That is not an experience that you need to like learn from or take away from because that is just not true. Nobody is fully healed. Everybody reflects something. Each person you see mirrors something, and everybody tells you what you need to learn about yourself. Everybody that you meet shows you what you can or how you can better yourself in some way or the other. So if you're saying you're fully healed, that's completely like ego, they call it spiritual ego in our community. So that's spiritual ego. Nobody is fully healed, but as long as you're able to say this and we're able to do this podcast where you're saying I'm healing, that's great. That is as good as it can get because
Yeah.
you're self-aware, you're doing the work, you're showing up, and as long as you keep doing that, you're on the right track. And like I said, I've told you this many times, see the trend you're in. If it's an uptrend, you're doing great.
And guys, what she means by that is I've reached out to her and been like, I'm reverting back. I'm reverting back. And she always has to say to me, Jonna, you've taken 5 steps forward and 2 back. You're still 3 steps ahead.
Exactly.
She was like,
Exactly.
you're not going to just take 5 steps forward and just stay there. And I'm always like, okay, yeah, yeah, got it, got it, got it. Because I'm always like, I'm reverting back to who I was, and I don't want to be that person.
And the fact that you say that I don't want to be puts you in a better position than that person. What I'm trying to say, awareness is healing.
Yeah.
Awareness is healing. It's like, so as long as you're aware, as long as anybody that's like, listening to this, as long as you're doing the work and say, I'm a flawed human being, I have work to do, I have some inner demons that I need to heal, and I'm doing the work, as long as you're showing up and doing that, you're already ahead. You're really, really ahead, more ahead than you ever feel like you are. Right. And if you feel like you're stalling, you're not getting value, change courses. Don't be afraid to change courses. Do what it takes to change courses.
And guys, I highly recommend. Now, Minu does not pimp herself out. She does not go out and beg people to work with her. That's just not her style. I highly, highly, 1010% recommend working with Minu if you have childhood traumas that you either have been with a therapist for years and it's just you're like you said you're evaluating it and you're just not getting value out of it anymore and you do want to change courses, or maybe you've never worked with a therapist and maybe you're scared of the idea. Menu's different. It's a coaching aspect. She truly coaches you through. She's there with you every step of the way, and she has different programs. And you can absolutely do a free call with her to see if your personalities jive, because sometimes that's a thing. Like sometimes you have to go to different therapy, even coaching. Not everyone's personality is the same. Like I mentioned, if Menu was a mellow, soft-spoken person, I probably would have been like, this just isn't going to work for me because I need someone to get in there and be like, bitch, stop. So I highly recommend her. So she'll be linked in the show notes as always. She is always linked in the show notes. So definitely reach out to her if you're wanting or you're even interested. Just do a call. What's a call going to hurt? It's free.
Thank you, girl. I did not expect you to say that.
Well, I mean, like we're talking about how to heal from it. And, like you said, like we can give advice all day long, but to truly do the work, it's really hard to do on your own. Like, sure, could you get a lot of self-help books? Sure, but to connect those dots, it really is hard work.
It is hard work. It is hard work. And I
It's
have
not
had
comfortable. It's not.
it really isn't. It really isn't. And I say this to everybody, like even before, if you want to book a call, go ahead. But even before booking a call, I just want to really say this. The kind of work that I do is not for the faint of heart. So if you are somebody that wants it very easy and mellow, I'm not your girl. I'm just going to say it. But if you are someone that's really ready and willing to take the next step, then I will be there for you. So we can always do a vibe check. I do vibe checks with literally everybody that I work with to make sure they're a good fit for me, because it's also a lot of time from my end and effort from my end, and make sure I'm a good fit for you. So we can definitely do that. And thanks, Jonna. Thanks for the shout out.
Oh, you're welcome. And like doing even one like a round of sessions with me and you, like I said, like you can always go back to your therapist and then maybe the course will be different with your therapist. You could say, hey, this is what I learned with this coach. This is what I now know works for me. I didn't get to, you're not fully going to heal in life. And so don't expect to fully heal in a 6 week to 8 week course with me and you, but you are going to recognize and become more self aware and you are going to start the healing process. That's
Mhm.
what I did with me and you. And that was like I said, I'd been to therapy many, many, many years before you and hadn't even started the healing process until we did like a couple sessions. And I'm like, why am I crying all the time? I was like, oh, I have emotion. Oh, that's what this is. It's like,
Yeah,
what is this wet stuff coming down from my eyes? What is
you were literally, I remember, John, I think it was like the third week, and you were like, is it normal to cry this much? And is it I was like, it's probably, and this is interesting because you had told me that, oh, I'm somebody that's very, I find it very hard to cry, and
yeah.
I don't cry that easily. And then she texts me like 3 weeks later, and she's like, is it normal to cry this much? And I'm like,
And I cry now. Like I'll be listening to a song and I'll just be crying and I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, that's because you're processing stuff. And I was like, that's because stuff is coming out. All the stuff that you suppressed years ago, like it's all coming out. And then I think week 5, week 6 is when you started seeing a lot of progress, which was
Hmm.
like a really sweet spot to be in, which was like, oh, I feel good right now. Nothing's really coming up for me. So I think what we're trying to say here is like doing it by yourself is hard because you're going to stand in your own way sometimes when you go deeper. So find your person, whoever that is, and stick with them for as long as it makes sense and it's helpful. And then don't be afraid to pivot and take turns and redo it or like do whatever it takes because you matter and you're here living this life because you matter. Like, of course you matter. You're listening to this podcast because you matter, right? It's like you matter.
Right. I agree. But thank you again so much for doing this. It's always an amazing conversation with you. So, guys, go follow Meenu. Everything will be linked in the show notes. And thank you so much for listening.
Yes, and for my audience, please follow Jonna. Her podcast is amazing. It's called Babel's Nonsense, and I'm gonna link all of her stuff in my show notes so you guys get both.
And her podcast is Is it Transcendence by Meenu? I always say
And
it.
into others.
I always say it wrong. I don't know why I always want to put your name on it.
Yeah, Transcend into Wellness is my podcast. Yeah.
Right. So, guys, just click the show notes and you can find more of her advice and her amazing coaching on her podcast. So, she does give amazing coaching for free on her podcast. So, go listen to more episodes. If you are just not quite ready to start with a coach, her podcast is a fabulous place to start.
Yes, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. And I will catch you guys in the next week, probably another one with Jonna. Like so we'll do more episodes,
We
guys. I
got
know.
several topics to talk about.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much, guys. And on that note, I will see you guys in the next week.
All righty, guys. Bye.